From talking about politics to being in politics. I am Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun. Joining me today is Greg Brady. You may have heard his name, you may have heard his voice over the past several years as the morning show host on AM 640 here in Toronto. You may have seen his very active social media presence, but Greg has traded in the microphone, kind of, for now, to run for office, seeking to be the Conservative MP for the riding of Ajax, just east of Toronto. Greg, thanks for taking some time. Why now? What was the decision like to go from yapping about politics, which I've spent my career doing, and someone will always say, "Why don't you run?" No, not running. What made you to say, "Yeah, you know what? This is the right time to do this"?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it wasn't dissatisfaction with what I was doing. I'm having, heavy topics for sure, especially the last few years. I arrived at 640 about 6 months before a pandemic was declared. So it feels like it's just been a nonstop series of bad news where we're trying to find the silver lining in all the dark clouds. In the last 5.5 years, I've been doing that show. But this felt like a combination, Brian, of right time, right moment, a really, really important federal election. Some elections are a little more important than others, and this one feels that way. Certainly for the younger generation, I would say. I think certainly for people who are voting age from 18 up until their mid-30s, because there's been a lot happen in the last 10 years. Perhaps it can't all be put at the feet of the federal Liberal Party, but I've reasoned that a lot of it can. And I wanted to get in and note that it's time to change the teams on the ice, on the field, whatever sports metaphor you want to use. And there was a wonderful opportunity to do it in my hometown of the last 17 years, and that's Ajax. I've been coming into Toronto from Ajax every single morning, no matter what I've done. This has been home here since my wife and I arrived back here after living in the U.S. for 10 years. So I'm ready to go. Ajax is really, really important to me, and this is a wonderful opportunity in a critical election. And I thought, why not? Let's go for it.
Okay, you mentioned younger voters and what they're dealing with, and you didn't mention the one word that some people want to make this entire election about, the T word, Trump. What are you hearing in your community? Because when I look at the polling, it doesn't matter if it's Leger or Abacus or Ipsos. You find the same thing. Older voters very concerned about Trump, but they've already got their home, most of them. A lot of them have it paid off. Younger voters, what are they worried about? Housing affordability, job security, economic security? What are you hearing in your community?
Yeah, it's a large combination of that, and there's no doubt the narrative of the election has certainly changed. Not just since Trump got elected, because we thought, well, maybe it'll be like the first 4 years in 2016 to 2020. But obviously, when he sets his sights on Canada, when he sets his sights on, in essence, putting some huge ratcheting up of economic pressure on a lot of important industries for us, and tourism, and our back and forth, and our overall relationship being among them. It's bound to get mentioned at the doors that I'll be knocking. It's bound to get mentioned in a lot of the community conversations that we have at the gym or at the super mailbox or wherever here in Ajax. But it won't be the be-all and end-all. And one of the things, it's funny, a friend of mine, a neighbor, said to me, who has wavered back and forth between the Liberals and Conservatives in his lifetime, he said, Mark Carney's having, in essence, like a job interview right now. This is a Broadway audition for the starring role. And how do you think he's handling Donald Trump? And the answer right now is avoiding him. It seems he's doing his absolute best, either not to talk about him, not to address him. We've got premiers, we've got business leaders of all ideologies and from all the provinces that have made these trips there. And I don't mind that we have to look at other aspects of trade, and I don't mind that we have to look at other partners, that's for sure. And we need to, the one thing I think both parties have been on track with, although I think Pierre Poilievre said it first, was we really need to break down interprovincial trade barriers. And do we trust a new government to break down interprovincial trade barriers, or the government, like all these other issues, housing, cost of living, crime, our borders, do we trust the government that said, yeah, we'll get to that over the last 9.5 years? And so even on tackling Trump, I think there's a great divide, but I see one leader more equipped to go into battle, to sit next to that person, look him in the eye, and it's Pierre Poilievre.
So I was out at an announcement that Pierre Poilievre was making in Vaughan on housing. And you and I are of similar vintage. I think you're a bit younger, but similar vintage. And Pierre's standing there in the middle of this housing development, promising that if he's elected, a conservative government will eliminate the GST on home purchases below $1.3 million. And I'm thinking back to the first home I ever bought, the second home I ever bought, the third. Like, this is insane to me that this is where housing prices are. And yet that is a massive issue in this that we can't overlook during the election campaign, because housing prices weren't this crazy before. And we've got to do something. The Trudeau Liberals have been talking about doing something on housing since the 2021 budget. The 2022 budget, they came out with the Housing Accelerator Fund. They did nothing with it for 2 years. I just don't see these guys as, Sean Fraser just announced, the former housing minister and immigration minister, just announced he's going to run again. I don't see these guys as being suited to fixing problems that they've ignored. It's the same backing band. It's still AC/DC. They just got a new lead singer.
Yeah, I think there's a chunk of accuracy to that for sure, because when you look at the situation, housing is affected by so many other mitigating factors. Certainly the population, and while there has to be a population of what our birth rate is, which has declined precipitously, it has to factor into legalized immigration, where we sure want to. Listen, I was an immigrant to the United States for 10 years, born in London, Ontario. Was lucky to have a job there, loved every second I was there, and then it was time to come home. I was ready to come home, and I came home, which is now home to Ajax. So the immigration factor is a huge thing. And then there's jobs. And then there's the jobs that you have when you're in your 20s. And everybody, I think, knows, like you said, Brian, you did, I did, so many people watching did. You know your 20s aren't going to be pretty economically. You might be paying off student loans, finishing grad school or finishing your undergrad degree, or going right into the workforce at 20 or 21. And you know you're not going to make a ton of money. And you know you're going to have to save. And you know your goal also probably is to find a partner, a wife, a husband, somebody that you can spend your life with. And you'll pool your income and resources. And maybe you'll be able to get into real estate at the ground level. And we at least knew it would take some time, but if we worked hard, we could be patient and it would happen. Mm-hmm. As you lay that out there, I don't see that here. And well, that's wonderful for Pierre Poilievre to make that move and elevate the GST being knocked off homes for $1.3 million. I mean, that should impact most of the homes in Ajax, and it should. What was the problem before is that I think it was just so hopeless. People weren't even trying. They weren't even. They had just a dream of home ownership. When you have to tell, I've told my 19-year-old kid who's a first-year student at university, I've said, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to own a home. When I bought a home in Michigan, which was at age 30. So I'm forecasting 11 years of kind of doom and gloom. I hate telling him that, but we're a pretty realistic family about the circumstances around us. And a lot of that has been created by federal policy the last 10 years.
Pierre even noted that it's ludicrous that you have to announce a policy like that, but that's how bad things have become. You mentioned immigration. One thing that I continually hear is, including from immigrants who are neighbors, who I work with, is there's just too many people too fast. And Ajax is a very large immigrant community.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're probably hearing that as well, because it's, again, Trudeau would acknowledge problems, and he said well over or about a year ago now, we're bringing in people faster than we can absorb them. They didn't do anything. The numbers are still what they were. Poilievre conservatives are saying cap immigration and tie it to housing and healthcare. Seems like a common sense policy.
Yeah, and there are certainly people in Ajax. My son playing soccer here, You end up talking to so many people who are recent immigrants and from different cultures. And his soccer team was it's a beautiful game, right? And you and I both like it, but it's you really get a genuine United Nations effect and meet people from a lot of different countries and a lot of different places, and they all generally say the same thing. They say we can certainly absorb more people here in Ajax. There are places to build homes in Ajax. We just haven't done it the right way. We haven't built near transit. We have a GO station at 401 in Westney, and there's almost no housing around it. So if the goal of transit, Brian, is, well, you don't need a car, in Ajax you do need a car. The buses, not everyone's going to get on a bus. It's not reliable for, for sometimes for younger people, sometimes for seniors, and certainly not for a family of four with little kids. So all these cars end up piled up at the GO station. We all try and do the right thing. Almost any chance I get, you can imagine for early morning radio it's hard, but almost every other chance I get to go downtown for a TFC match or meet a friend of mine, it's all on the GO train. But you have to drive to get there. So Pierre Poilievre's been talking about that, and that seems to be the concept, is he'll loop municipalities into funding for housing, but the municipalities have to do that the right way and build near transit and build near the bus stations and build near the GO trains. And so far, again, there's a lot of fingerprints in why housing's been kind of a failure in Canada. And we think this is a worldwide crisis, and it is in a way, but Brian, you see the prices. We could go across the border to upstate New York. We could go back the other way down to Windsor and find beautiful homes, huge homes in Michigan or New York State for 350 or 400 grand US. And probably that's where we were in the GTA 10, 12 years ago. So it's going to take a monumental effort. And those are the issues. Again, Donald Trump is going to have a shelf life. There's no doubt about it. Someone's going to have to make a new trade deal with him and calm these waters down. But who's going to build the whole housing? And that's still got to be a fundamental question of this election.
Yeah, all the other underlying issues are still going to be there.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how you trust the team that got us in this position to get us out simply because there's a new guy in the White House. You announced a little while ago you now have a Liberal opponent. She's someone that I would say could be considered a star candidate if she was running in Toronto, because she's the deputy mayor of Toronto and a councillor for Scarborough. Ajax is 2 cities over. So is Jennifer McKelvey a star candidate out your way, or a novelty because she's doesn't live there and is currently representing a different city?
Well, Jennifer's got some cachet. I remember thinking about it for about 5 minutes, and I'm thinking, that's a nice person. I've interviewed her on the radio. I've never had an issue with her. But there's 2 things about this, Brian. One is it's definitely an outsider parachute candidate. There really aren't ties to the community, and to have ties to the community, you have to have been born here or you have to have lived here for a period of time. There's plenty of people not born where they end up running for office. Of course, that's true.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think people will treat this as a bit of I wouldn't call it quite a trick, but I think they have a right to be cynical about this. There were great local candidates here with the retirement of Mark Holland as our MP, and there were people that liked Mark Holland, people frustrated by him. It was a big reason I got in. I was going to run against whoever the Liberal candidate was, whether it was Mark Holland or not. So I didn't jump on the horse as soon as Mark Holland decided he wasn't going to run again. I was going to run against him, that's for sure. But I also think people have, furrowed up their eyebrows a little bit at the idea of a Toronto City Councillor for a few years now, 5 or 6 years, coming out to Ajax and thinking I can just settle in and ingratiate myself in a 5-week election campaign. No, you can't. And I would say the same about myself. If the Conservatives had said to me, run in Spadina, Fort York, run somewhere in Markham or Newmarket, or heaven forbid out of province, or down the road even to my hometown in London where I grew up, I'd say, I don't know the issues well enough in a short enough period of time. And I would also make the point that given I've talked a lot about Toronto politics and policy on the air for a long, long time, and I've been critical of The Ford government knows where I've been critical. The Trudeau government knows where I've been critical. I've been critical of policies of John Tory and Olivia Chow. I'm trying to be an equal opportunity critic. There's always things politicians and parties sometimes do well, and there's always things they get wrong. The goal is to tell the audience both. And I would tell you that since Olivia Chow's become mayor in the spring of 2023, Jennifer McKelvey has voted with Mayor Chow on things like continuing this plague of safe injection sites, especially near schools and playgrounds. She has voted for drug decriminalization across the city. And in essence, when you get one, you get the other. You're not going to arrest people. And I don't want to see people hauled off in handcuffs, but we must get people into some form of treatment. We have to do that. And that's a huge platform of a future Poilievre government. So I think the people in Ajax, to sum up, will look at this somewhat cynically. I think they'll see it for what it is. But it's also a microcosm of Mark Carney being prime minister right now, someone who is certainly entitled. He's a Canadian citizen. He's entitled to run for prime minister. He's entitled to run for the Liberal leadership before that. But to act like you've just been around and you know the scene, that's not going to fly where I live in Ajax. So we'll have a race, that's for sure. And I want it to be about policy and certainly not about personality. I'm a good family person. She is as well. But I really don't think the voters in Ajax are going to be fooled by this. And I think there's a little bit of wool trying to be pulled over their eyes by the Liberals sending her out here.
All right. Well, Greg, all the best in the campaign. Campaigns are slogs. Yeah. I've been on too many of them, but not on the candidate side. So the new experience for you. All the best.
Brian, thank you very much.
All right. Let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.